For me, it was frightening on a couple of levels because I've never, in all the time that I've been coming to London.
Sammy Davis Jr. kept a storage unit under a fake name. He paid cash every month until he died. For 3 decades, it sat untouched in a Burbank warehouse. When they finally opened it, investigators found more than memorabilia. There were letters about his real mother's identity, tapes of conversations that could destroy careers, and proof of what really happened with Kim Novak in 1958. He documented everything. After 30 years of silence, the truth is finally out. Sammy Davis Jr. was born on December 8, 1925 in Harlem, New York City. His parents, Sammy Davis Sr. and Ella Sanchez, were both vaudeville performers. That meant Sammy entered the world with show business already in his blood. But there was a hidden part of his story. His mother, Ella, was Cuban. The family kept that quiet because of anti-Cuban feelings in America at the time. In those days, revealing such roots could hurt record sales and public support. Even as a newborn, Sammy's life was shaped by racism and the need to hide parts of who he was. Harlem, alive with the energy of the Harlem Renaissance, became his first stage, setting the tone for the rest of his life. By age 2, Sammy was already performing with the Will Maston Trio, the act led by his father and family friend, Will Maston. Most toddlers played with toys. Sammy danced and sang in theaters across the country. The spotlight became his playground, but it came at a cost. He didn't have a normal childhood. Instead, he learned to charm audiences and master his craft while other kids went to school. The constant touring was exhausting, but it gave him strength. It also showed him the ugly face of racism in America. He saw the signs that said whites only and felt the sting of being treated differently. That fire inside him to break barriers started young. At just 3, Sammy's life took another turn. His parents split. His father took custody and brought him even deeper into show business. Will Maston became more than a mentor. He became like a godfather, shielding Sammy as best he could. But there was only so much protection anyone could offer. Sammy saw the discrimination black performers faced. But he also saw how to fight back with talent, with grace, and with relentless hard work. Even as a toddler, he was no ordinary kid. By now, he was a seasoned pro, traveling from city to city, leaving crowds in awe. When Sammy was 7, he stepped onto the big screen in Rufus Jones for President. He acted alongside Ethel Waters in a film that dared to imagine a black boy as president. The movie was funny, but it carried weight. In a time when black faces were rare in Hollywood, Sammy's charm lit up the screen. His singing and dancing captured hearts. The film hinted at what was to come. Sammy wasn't just a performer. He was a force. He had the rare gift of making people look past the color of his skin, if only for a few minutes. But the life of the stage meant sacrifice. Sammy never went to school like other kids. There were no desks, no chalkboards, no school bells for him. His learning came from the road, from books he found, from the people he met, from the stages he owned. He taught himself languages, instruments, and skills that no classroom could offer. His hunger for knowledge matched his hunger to perform. He proved that greatness doesn't always come from a schoolhouse. It can come from passion, grit, and a mind that never stops wanting to learn. In 1943, everything changed. At 18 years old, 5'6" and 120 pounds, Sammy was drafted into the U.S. Army. He left the safety of the stage and entered a world that was far crueler. He joined one of the first integrated units. But the promise of unity was a lie. The army was filled with racism. The first soldier he met called him a slave. The brutal truth hit him hard. His talent meant nothing in uniform. He fought to survive, facing fights and hate almost every day. The army was supposed to build men. For Sammy, it broke his innocence. The abuse he faced was shocking. Once white soldiers kidnapped him and painted him white from head to toe, mocking everything he was. Another time, they tricked him into drinking beer laced with urine. Some nights they urinated on him. His nose was broken 3 times. And they weren't done. They humiliated him by forcing him to perform, scrawling slurs on his forehead before shoving him on stage. The cruelty was endless, designed to crush him. One night, Soldiers tied him to a tree in the freezing cold. He stood there helpless like so many victims of racial terror before him. The cold bit into his skin, but the pain went deeper. It was a message. No matter where you go, no matter what you achieve, remember your place. The army didn't protect him. It looked the other way. That night stayed with him forever. A scar on his body and his heart. It got worse. In one savage attack, a group of soldiers beat him so badly he spent 3 days in the hospital. The beating wasn't random, it was a punishment. But no one was held accountable. The army that was supposed to unite Americans let the hate fester. Sammy lay in that hospital bed, realizing he had to survive on his own strength. The pain drove him to dark places. He thought of ending it all. The weight of hate, the endless cruelty, it almost broke him. But something pulled him back. When he joined the Army's entertainment unit, he found his weapon, his voice, his dancing, his showmanship. Even the men who hated him couldn't deny it. Their applause gave him power. When Sammy Davis Jr. came back from military service in 1951, he was ready to take on the world. He had fought for his country, and now he wanted to fight for his place in show business. That chance arrived at Ciro's, the most glamorous nightclub on Sunset Boulevard. It was March 1951. Sammy, as part of the Will Maston Trio, opened for Janice Page. The night was magical. But after the Academy Awards that same year, something incredible happened. The room filled with stars like Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, and Judy Garland. They watched in awe as Sammy delivered a performance that made him a star overnight. The buzz was unstoppable. Bookings poured in. In 1952, he appeared on Eddie Cantor's Colgate Comedy Hour and even got a $20,000 TV pilot from ABC. It was unheard of for a black entertainer. No sponsor backed it, but Sammy had already broken through. Sierra Rose made him the talk of the town. Just 3 years later, in 1954, tragedy struck. On November 19th, Sammy, just 29 years old, was driving his Cadillac from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. On U.S. Route 66, another car backed into his lane at a fork. The crash forced the car's horn button into his left eye. The damage was permanent. He was rushed to community hospital, but doctors couldn't save the eye. He stayed only 9 days. Friends like Frank Sinatra stood by him. Offers for shows came in at triple his old rate. Sammy wore an eye patch at first, then a glass eye. He joked, calling himself a one-eyed Negro who's Jewish. Many thought his career was over. But 8 weeks later, he was back on stage at Ciro's, dazzling Hollywood's finest once again. That accident changed Sammy's life in another way. In 1960, he converted to Judaism. While recovering, he read about the Jews' long struggle to survive. A friend, Eddie Cantor, had given him a mezuzah and talked about faith. Sammy felt connected. He said he had always been Jewish in his thinking. Many mocked him, but he believed being black and Jewish made him stronger. He became a symbol of resilience and stood up for civil rights. Even as his fame grew, Sammy faced cruel racism. In 1950s Las Vegas, he could headline shows but not stay in the hotels where he performed. He couldn't walk through the front doors or eat in the restaurants. He refused to accept it. He demanded change. With the Rat Pack's help, he pressured casinos. By the early 1960s, he earned $25,000 a week at the Sands and became the first black entertainer to stay at the Frontier. By 1971, Las Vegas hotels finally ended official segregation. Sammy helped make it happen. Sammy was more than a singer. He was a master of many talents. He taught himself drums, trumpet, piano, vibraphone, and more. He could mimic voices, do impressions, tell jokes, dance, and even perform gun tricks. His shows were full of surprises. He earned the nickname Mr. Show Business because no one else could do it all. In 1956, Sammy took Broadway by storm. Mr. Wonderful opened on March 22nd. The show was written just for him, almost unheard of for a black star at that time. Critics hated it. The New York Times called it loud and mediocre. But Sammy's charm filled the seats. The show ran 383 performances and earned back its $225,000 cost. He even turned every performance into something new, mixing in his nightclub act. His father and uncle joined him on stage. A young Chita Rivera was part of the cast, too. Offstage, Sammy threw wild parties and had high-profile romances. He made Broadway history. In 1964, Sammy made history again with Golden Boy. It opened on October 20th. He played a black boxer in love with a white woman. When he kissed her on stage, it caused outrage. Bomb threats and death threats followed, but Sammy stood firm. His performance earned him a Tony nomination. During this time, he also marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and Selma. Sammy risked everything for what he believed in. His show forced audiences to face hard truths. Sammy didn't stop at the stage. In 1958, he starred in Anna Lucasta. It had an all-black cast and tackled tough issues. In 1959, he lit up the screen in Porgy and Bess with Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge. By 1969, he shined in Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity. He also joined the Rat Pack in Ocean's 11 in 1960 and Robin and the Seven Hoods in 1964. Sammy opened doors for black actors in Hollywood. On television, Sammy was everywhere. He appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, The Tonight Show, and so many more. In 1966, he launched the Sammy Davis Jr. Show on NBC. He was one of the first black entertainers to headline a primetime network variety show. Big stars like Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton joined him. He worked harder than anyone, giving dozens of interviews a week to promote the show. His success helped other black artists find their place on TV. The friendship between Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. began in 1941. Sammy was only 15 years old. He was performing with the Will Maston Trio in Detroit. Frank was 26 and touring with Tommy Dorse's orchestra. The moment Frank saw Sammy on stage, he knew he was witnessing something special. Over the next decade, Frank kept finding ways to help Sammy. In 1947, Frank made sure the Will Maston Trio opened for him at the Capitol Theater in New York. That moment gave Sammy a huge break and changed his life forever. Frank didn't just open doors. He stood up for Sammy when it truly mattered. In 1950, Sammy was turned away from the Copacabana in New York because of his race. Frank was furious. He demanded Sammy return the next night. This time, Sammy was welcomed. Frank didn't stop there. He made it a point to walk in with Sammy, sit at the same table, and refuse gigs at clubs that wouldn't treat Sammy as an equal. At a time when black entertainers were forced to use separate entrances in hotels, Frank's actions were bold and dangerous. When Sammy nearly died in a 1954 car crash and lost his left eye, Frank stepped in again. He paid the hospital bills and brought Sammy to Palm Springs to recover. Frank gave him no room for self-pity. He told Sammy to get back on stage or risk losing everything. Within weeks, Sammy was back in front of audiences. His courage became legendary. Sammy admired Frank so much he tried to copy his style, even the curl in his hair. Their friendship showed the world what true loyalty looked like. It gave Sammy the strength to break into Hollywood's inner circle. In 1960, the world saw that friendship shine on the big screen. Ocean's 11 premiered in Las Vegas on August 3rd. The film starred Frank, Dean Martin, Sammy, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford. They played World War II vets pulling off a massive heist. Behind the scenes, the Rat Pack shot scenes at night and performed live at the Sands and other clubs until dawn. Sammy played Josh Howard, a key part of the plan. The film made $5.5 million at the box office, about $55 million today. That final shot of the Rat Pack walking past a casino sign with their names became an iconic image. Sammy wasn't a sidekick anymore. He was one of the stars. By the late 1950s, Sammy was earning up to $25,000 a week in Las Vegas. But even as he packed theaters, he couldn't stay in the hotels where he performed. Segregation forced him to stay miles away on the west side. Sammy didn't let it go. He became the first black entertainer to get free room and board at the Frontier. That helped break down the color barrier in Las Vegas. He kept pushing, supporting civil rights protests and buying a stake in the Tropicana. When Nevada passed a law in 1971 ending hotel discrimination, it was partly because of Sammy. When he died in 1990, Las Vegas dimmed its lights for a minute. The city that once rejected him now honored him like a king. Sammy also left his mark in films after Ocean's 11. He starred in Sergeants 3 in 1962 with the Rat Pack. The movie made $4.3 million. Sammy even wore a hat borrowed from John Wayne. In 1964, he starred in Robin and the Seven Hoods. The film mixed music, comedy, and gangster drama. Sammy played Will, holding his own alongside Frank, Dean, and Bing Crosby. These films weren't just fun. They showed that Sammy was a star in his own right. He helped change how Hollywood saw black entertainers. But Sammy's life wasn't just about fame. In 1957, he fell in love with Kim Novak. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. They met on The Steve Allen Show. Soon they were spending holidays together, even meeting each other's families. But interracial relationships were dangerous then. Only 4% of Americans approved of them. EMTT Till's lynching was still fresh in people's minds. Sammy and Kim tried to keep things secret. Sammy hid under blankets in cars. They met at a beach house in Malibu. But in January 1958, a gossip column falsely claimed they were engaged. The news spread like wildfire. Studios panicked. The mob got involved. Sammy was kidnapped by mobsters tied to Columbia Pictures. They told him to end things with Kim or lose his remaining eye. Or Weiss, even mob boss Sam Johanna said he couldn't protect Sammy in Hollywood. Sammy was terrified. On January 7, 1958, he broke up with Kim. He didn't want to. He had no choice. Days later, on January 10th, he married Lori White, a black singer. It was a sham to please the mob and the press. He paid her up to $25,000. That night, he was so distraught he tried to strangle her. Later, his assistant found him alone with a gun. The marriage ended in April. Sammy's love story with Kim had cost him almost everything. It showed how dangerous it was to challenge the rules of race in 1950s America. Sammy Davis Jr.'s marriage to Mae Britt in 1960 was more than just a union of two people. It was a direct challenge to one of America's ugliest taboos. At that time, interracial marriage was illegal in 31 states. A Gallup poll from 1958 showed that only 4% of Americans supported black-white marriages. The couple's plan to marry at Temple Israel of Hollywood fell apart after the synagogue received bomb threats and violent warnings. They had no choice but to move the ceremony to Davis's Hollywood Hills home. Frank Sinatra and Peter Lawford stood beside them as witnesses. Both Sammy and Mae had converted to Judaism before the wedding. They became one of the rare black Jewish interracial couples in the spotlight. The price for their courage was steep. Swastikas appeared on their property. Britt lost her contract with 20th Century Fox. Davis was disinvited from President Kennedy's 1961 inauguration, all because of who he chose to love. Raising a family brought its own trials. They had a daughter, Tracy, born in 1961. Later, they adopted two sons, Mark and Jeff. The hate didn't stop. People scrawled racial slurs on their cars. Their home was defaced with swastikas. Sammy and Mae tried to protect their kids, surrounding them with friends who judged by talent, not race, but the world outside that bubble could be cruel. Tracy later said she sometimes felt safe, only to be shocked by the racism she met beyond their circle. Britt's career was over. Studios believed no one wanted to see a white actress married to a black man. Even after their divorce, Sammy stayed active in his children's lives. He helped with their Jewish education and supported his son's bar mitzvah. In 1968, after 8 years of marriage, Britt filed for divorce. She cited extreme cruelty and mental suffering. Sammy's affair with singer Lola Fana was the breaking point, but their problems ran deeper. His endless touring and the strain of public hate left little space for family. After the split, Sammy's world fell apart. He sank into drugs and alcohol. Cocaine and AML Nitrite became his escape. His Beverly Hills home turned into a wild party house where celebrities came to drink and use drugs. On stage, he sparkled. Offstage, he was often drunk, high, and out of control. The gap between his fame and private misery grew wider. In 1970, Sammy married dancer Altav Gore. Reverend Jesse Jackson officiated. They adopted a son, Manny, in 1989, just a year before Sammy's death. Alvisai gave him some stability, but their life was far from calm. Their mansion became infamous for wild parties. Rumors swirled about wife-swapping and orgies. Through it all, Altavizi stayed by Sammy as he battled addiction and later throat cancer. After his death in 1990, she was left with over $7 million in tax debt. She lost their home and most of their belongings. She battled her own drinking problem and struggled in poverty, a sad contrast to their former glamour. Yet she fought to keep Sam's memory alive, organizing tributes and charity work. Sammy's gambling addiction helped ruin him financially. He earned around $50 million in his career. At times, he made as much as $185,000 a night, but he died owing the IRS over $7 million. He could blow $40,000 in one night at the tables. Unlike Sinatra, whose debts were often forgiven, Sammy had to pay his losses. Bad business deals and shady tax shelters added to his troubles. His generosity also played a part. He supported many people and spent far beyond his means. In June 1972, he reached the top of the charts for the first and only time. His version of the Candyman hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It sold over 2 million copies and earned him a gold record. This was surprising since Sammy hated the song at first, but its sweet tune and his charm won over a new generation of fans. I've Got to Be Me became his anthem. Released in 1968, the song's message of living fully and staying true spoke to Sammy's fight for identity. He faced racism, religious bias, and had even lost his left eye in a 1954 car crash. But he never let these things break him. He often ended shows with the song, turning each performance into a statement of defiance and hope. Las Vegas became his kingdom. By the late 1960s, he earned up to $25,000 a week there. He helped change the city's racist ways by demanding equal treatment. His shows were dazzling mixes of song, dance, impressions, and comedy. His success helped make Las Vegas the entertainment capital it became. His face still appears on casino walls and billboards, a lasting tribute. On television, Sammy broke barriers, too. In the 1960s and 1970s, he lit up shows like The Ed Sullivan Show and The Tonight Show. His own 1966 series made history as one of the first network variety shows hosted by a black star. He could sing, dance, joke, and impersonate with ease, winning millions of hearts. But the darkest side of his life never stayed far. His drug use and drinking worsened during his years of occult exploration. Friends described nights of cocaine, endless booze, and wild excess. Sammy himself admitted he wanted to try everything, but it left him drained. His marriage to May fell apart under the weight of addiction and betrayal. He became unreliable, once ending a show after just one song. Though he later quit cocaine, the battle with alcohol stayed with him. The deeper he went into his dark pursuits, the harder it became to control his demons. And in those years, the great Mr. Show business seemed at risk of losing it all. In 1987, fans all over the world were thrilled when Sammy Davis Jr. decided to reunite with Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. It had been a dream for years, and now the farewell tour was finally happening. They called it the International Farewell Tour at first. Later, when Liza Minnelli joined in, it became known as the Ultimate Event. This tour was bigger than anything the Rat Pack had ever tried. They no longer played small nightclubs. They performed in huge arenas that could hold between 10,000 and 25,000 people. It was a bold move no one had seen before. The first show took place at the Oakland Coliseum on March 13, 1988. At first, it felt like magic, but soon cracks began to show. Dean Martin was already 70, and the non-stop travel and late-night parties were too much for him. After just 5 shows, he left, blaming a kidney problem. The tour had to pause, but Sinatra and Davis didn't give up. They brought in Minnelli, and the show went on. They finished the U.S. leg in Miami in January 1989. Then they took their act to Japan, Australia, and Europe. The tour finally ended in May 1989. The real battle started in August 1989. Sammy began to lose his sense of taste. His throat felt sore all the time. Doctors soon gave him the heartbreaking news: throat cancer. All those years of smoking, up to 4 packs a day, had led him here. Sammy had a choice. He could let surgeons remove his voice box to save his life, or he could try radiation to keep singing. He chose his voice. He went through 8 brutal weeks of treatment. At first, it seemed to work. The tumor shrank. Sammy even returned to the stage a few times. But by early 1990, The cancer was back and spreading fast. Surgery was no longer an option. Sammy could barely whisper, and his weight dropped to about 60 pounds. The disease took away his strength, his voice, and finally his life. On May 16, 1990, at age 64, Sammy Davis Jr. died. His gift to the world silenced by the very habit that had fueled his long nights and endless performances. But the sadness didn't stop there. When Sammy died at his Beverly Hills home, the truth about his finances came out. Despite earning millions over 6 decades, he owed more than $5 million in taxes. With penalties and interest, that debt had grown to $7 million, which would be about $13 million today. His estate was worth around $4 million, but the IRS took it all to pay what was owed. His wife, Elvis, was left to pick up the pieces. Because she had co-signed their tax returns, she now shared the debt. She had to sell their 11,000-foot mansion for $2.7 million. But most of that went to pay the mortgage. The debts didn't end there. Sammy still owed $2,000 for tuxedos, $3,500 for groceries, and $118,000 on a shopping center mortgage. Even his insurance and future royalties went straight to the IRS. Alvis fought legal battles for years. By 1997, she settled with the IRS, but she lost almost everything along the way. The world watched in shock as one of its brightest stars faded, not just in health, but in fortune, too. The heartbreak deepened with the auction that followed. In September 1991, more than 1,800 people gathered in Los Angeles. They came to buy pieces of Sammy's life. Over 500 of his personal items went up for sale. His gold record for the Candyman sold for $4,275. A pair of his tap shoes brought in $11,000. People even bought his jewelry, scrapbooks, walking sticks, and hats. The auction raised $439,000. It barely made a dent in that $7 million tax bill. Alvis wept as she watched her husband's treasures leave her hands. To make things wise, some of Sammy's things had already gone missing. The missing list included 185 pieces of jewelry and even an Andy Warhol painting. Then came a twist no one expected. In late 1991, a 28-year-old man named Matthias Herenek got a strange bill for $365. It was for a storage unit he had never rented. His ID had been stolen. The storage company, a one self-storage in Burbank, looked into it and found the unit had been rented with fake information. Afraid it might be hiding something dangerous, the manager called the police. When they opened the locker, what they found was shocking. Inside was Sammy Davis Jr.'s personal treasures. There was a trumpet, an antique record player, a jukebox with a Candyman, clothing, documents, and photos. Someone had rented that unit just 2 weeks after the auction, trying to hide the items. Police learned an employee of Alvis had helped stash the items. He said the IRS was after everything and he was trying to save what was left. They used stolen ID and paid in cash. If they had kept paying, no one would have known. But the IRS found out. They seized the items, hoping to recover more of the debt. Alvis said she knew nothing about it. This hidden storage was just another sad chapter in a story of talent, fame, and downfall.